with regards to the Western Front experience in 1915, 1916. They just been telling me about the person we have been joined between you and the sun, and with opportunity. Was it the day on July the 1st, or was it the next day of seeing the mine craters at La Boisselle?
It was about the 4th of July, I think it was. As I remember, about the 4th of July.
If we come back to your own personal recollections of the Somme, I'd like to hear about what training and briefing you had for this attack, whether you were in the first or second or third line, and your own experiences on the 1st of July.
No, in the first division was not in the initial attack at all. We were ready. We marched down from the loose area. We marched down, arrived at Elba about 2 days after the initial attack. And we were really in reserve in Elba for the next phase of the attack. I was then the battalion scout officer, and I had a section of about 15 men, and we were termed the battalion scout and sniping section. Well, I think it was about the 6th or 7th of July, the battalion commander sent for me and said that we had to go into the attack toward a wood called Bazin-la-Petite Wood. And as we'd never been anywhere near it before and didn't know anything about it, Theo told me that I was to take my scout section up during the night to find out where Bazin-la-Petite Wood was and to find out what the situation was and to meet the battalion soon after first light at the eastern edge of Mammoth Wood. So I set off when we had a trench map of the area, and I set off during the night in darkness, and we went on a yearly walk right up through Mammoth Wood and through a terrible scene of destruction and let's say carnage. But the Mammoth Wood had a terrific bombarding, and trees and things were lying at all angles. And the wood was literally full of dead and dying men. And one had to pick one's way through an enormous number of wounded men still alive, who implored you to help them. But you just couldn't do anything about it. I mean, you had to go on. I mean, the number of stretcher bearers was so meager in these days. These casualties had been there for some of them 2 or 3 days and never been near them. They implored you for water, help them, give me water. But you couldn't. If you could, nothing you could do. And so I stumbled on in the dark with my 15 men. We went through this wood. I can remember some of the corpses of the wounded men. I can see them to this day. I mean, I remember one lieutenant colonel lying there, shot through the throat. Somebody tried to put a bandage on his throat. I can remember him to this day, just lying there on the path through the wood. But anyhow, it was just getting light, and I got through this wood. There was no hostile activity of any sort. And when we got through the wood, there was a largest gap, I suppose about 1,500 yards between Basanton Wood and Mammoth Wood. The ground was covered with corpses and often a lot of dead horses. And even some dead cows, I remember, were lying on the ground, all their bellies blown up. Anyhow, I went into Bazin-la-Petite Wood. I mean, not knowing whether I was in Edinburgh or in Fenderland. I went into the wood, and the first thing I came upon was an enormous concrete dugout. Not dugout, a pillbox. So I gingerly opened the door and looked inside, and there were, I think, about 40 wounded Germans in it. And again, implored for help, the water. But again, one could do anything about it. The other said, well, I mean, you just have to ignore such things. And then I was going through Basington the Wood, when suddenly there was a tremendous rush of a lot of people. And a young officer came tearing towards me. He said, the enemy are coming. They had panicked. And they'd rushed past me and disappeared in the sort of half light. And there wasn't any sign of anybody coming at all. But I had sort of went down with my section. We got to the front end of Basington the Wood, and there wasn't a sign of anybody. There didn't anybody lying on the Germans anywhere. And then it was getting a bit late, so I'd established the fact that Basington Wood wasn't held by the Germans, and the British troops who had held it decided they camped past me. And so I walked back with my section and met the battalion who by this time had trickled up to Mammoth Wood. I met them at the agreed rendezvous, and we crossed the open ground to Basington Wood and occupied the wood and waited for orders what we to do next. Well, we were there several hours, and the only cover we had was shell holes. And so we all sort of found the biggest and deepest shell hole and squatted in it, hope for the best. And I was squatting in one big hole with some of my section, including my section, my platoon, not my platoon, my scout section commander. And the Germans started shelling us with big, what they call black morale, very big stuff. And the shell, as long as you were in your hole, I mean, you felt more or less safe. I mean, the shell had pitch even 30 yards away, as long as you were below ground, all was well. But suddenly, there was a terrific sort of roar in the air, and the shell practically pitched above us. And actually pitched practically in our hole, and there was a terrific bang, and most of my people were killed. And I was, chap next to me was my sergeant, he was absolutely blown to pieces. And I was sitting next to him, and was hardly touched. The piece of shell gouged a piece out of my behind. And there I was. I was, actually the shell was so hot that it really cauterized the wound straight away. I mean, I didn't bleed very much. And then so I hobbled to battalion headquarters and said I'd been hit by a bit of a shell. And the battalion commander said, well, if you want to have a medical treatment, you know perfectly well that you have to do it yourself. You have to walk, find somebody, because no stretcher bear will never take you back all the way you've come. And so I was told I was to go, to the best of my ability, back to find a dressing station. And so I started off, and I walked, or hobbled and hobbled. Because the shell had torn my clothes, I must have to sort of beautiful rags. And I eventually, after I walked, 5 or 6 miles like that, until I came to a dressing station. If I hadn't, if I'd been more incapacitated, I wouldn't be here today, because nobody had picked me up. But I got to the dressing station, and I was then given an injection, and my wound was dressed, and I was put in a stretcher, put into a horse ambulance, and removed. And I eventually finished up in a casualty clearing station, and finished up in Rouen in the hospital. And on the hospital ship, I went to Southampton, and from there I went to Kazakh Hospital in Liverpool. That was the end of my day on the Somme.
You know, we might come back to the Somme, but taking your career still further, you convalesced at this hospital, and then what was it that tempted you into changing services?
Well, I mean, even when I was still very young, and I liked adventure, and also but I had enough of the discomfort of adventure offer. And I thought, when I had been an infantry soldier, I had looked at machines flying over us, and I thought, well, what an exciting life that must be. So when I was convalescing and I saw in orders that volunteers were urgently required to ride Flying Corps, I put my name down. And I was asked to go before a medical board. It was a very sort of critical one. I mean, they were examined from head to toe. I was told I had adenoids. Until I had them removed, I couldn't become a pilot. And so I said, oh, well, I had to have my adenoids removed, get more sick leave, which was duly done. And I was accepted and passed fit for pilot training. And then the pilot training was so urgent, I mean, pilots were so urgently needed that
What date was this?
Hmm?
What date was
This was about April 17 or March 17. I think March to April 17.
Because April 17 was known as Bloody April, as far as the RFC were concerned, on the Western Front.
Yeah. Well, it's about that time, about March, and so I had to forego all the preliminary training, and I was sent to an aerodrome called Waddington near Lincoln to do flying training straight away. I didn't need knowledge of machines or how they were made or the engines or anything. I did maybe first day I arrived, had to go up and do dual, and I think I only did 3 hour dual, and the instructor stepped out and said, "Now all yours, you take it up by yourself."
Now, what sort of planes were these that
These
you
were Morris Farben Longhorns.
And what about gunnery practice? How did you do that?
We did during your flying training. I mean, you only did one flight a day when you were being taught, and you always did it at the crack of dawn because the air was stillest at the crack of dawn, and more suitable for a learner to fly without any bumps in the air. Until during the rest of the day, you did machine gun training on the ground with Vickers guns, and you did.
Did they arrange that there was some degree of movement in this?
They didn't. None. You just fired at a stationary target. And then you did wireless training, and you had to pass out only ascending. You had to pass out, I think it was 30 words a minute.
Morse code.
Morse code, sending. That's all. So when I became a pilot, I had no training at all with weapons in a machine. None at all.
What about combat maneuver and that sort of thing?
Nothing at all. Not doing.
When you say that you have been up in dual control and then solo, there must have been certain recognized maneuvers that you have been trained and have to show proficiency in to get a pilot certificate.
No, all you had to do was you had to do 70 landings, and then you had to do a cross country that you had to land at 3 separate aerodromes, which you hadn't been to before, land, and eventually go the circuit round and come home again. And then you did that all on Morris Farmans, and then you did so many hours on Airbus, which had a different form of engine. They had rotary engines, and you did that. Then you see, I was destined to become artillery corporation pilot. So I then was sent to Brooklands in Surrey, where we did artillery observation course. And that was, I mean, you merely learned to use your wireless to a ground station, and the targets were simulated on the sort of Bagshot Heath area by puffs of smoke. And that was the only training we did. We did no training with our armament whatsoever.
And what about the avoidance of enemy aircraft?
Nothing.
Not
No training whatsoever.
Coming from a very fundamental thing to something more show. What about your uniform and your rank?
I was by then a captain in my own regiment in the army. I was an infantry captain, and I merely, but I was in the when I joined. I'm merely a pilot officer. I mean, I didn't. My captain's rank didn't count at all. I was really a flying officer.
And how were you addressed?
You were dressed.
Addressed. How were you addressed?
But how we were dressed? I think I was called captain.
Yes.
You were called captain those days in the Royal Flying Corps. You say, how was I dressed? Dressed was very informal. I used to wear my army tunic, um, and I wore breeches and a flying corps cap, a 4.5 cap. And when you got your wings, of course, you put your wings up, and that was my dress. I never had what was called a maternity jacket at all, ever.
And in the air, what did you wear for warmth?
When we first went out, we were issued with a leather coat, and we had gauntlet gloves, goggles, and a flying helmet. And the leather coat was lined, and it was thought very sort of, I mean, we think it was you through the engines had neat cast oil, and it was thought of you were those sort of dashing pilots if your coats covered in cast oil. Of course, the engines in those days were being rotary. The oil was flung out the whole time. The whole machine was really was saturated with this oil.
So
you yourself.
From your first flight, how quickly were you sent out to the Western Front?
I think I had done 30 hours flying altogether when I was sent out to the Western Front.
And in terms of weeks?
Oh, about 5 weeks, I think.
For anybody who is using this tape for research, I might mention that we not only have some Western Front recollections and background of Brigadier Cripps in the Western Front memoirs, but his diaries and his flying logbook for anybody working on the RFC in the diary section. Now, which was your first aerodrome on the Western Front?
Well, as a new pilot, you had to take a new machine with you because in the so fellow pilot work. You took a new machine with you to Saint-Omer in France, which was the main base RFC base. From there, I was told I was allotted to number 9 squadron, which was at an aerodrome called Proven, which was a few miles west of Upton in Belgium. It was the most westerly of all aerodromes, really. And so I duly arrived at the aerodrome with my new machine and was watched very critically by all the other pilots and observers on the station to see what sort of landing I made. And I reported with my new machine to my squadron commander.
Was all of your work done in artillery observation?
No, we were in the artillery observation was merely one part of the work.
Yes.
There were many other things we did. We did infantry cooperation.
Strapping.
Well, no, infantry cooperation was in any offensive. We had to locate the forward positions of our own troops and the forward position of the enemy troops, which meant you had to fly at exceedingly low altitude. I mean, you had to fly at about 100 feet or 150 feet. And that was one very hazardous task.
How did you have to get this information back?
By message bags. You had blank maps with you, and you called for flares.
Yes.
By firing a flare yourself, by firing a bloody pistol, you called for flares, and the infantry was supposed to light particular coloured flares on the ground.
You were in RE8s, were you?
Yes.
So your son would write these messages, would he?
No, I wrote them. The pilot did everything. The pilot's life depended on the eyesight of the observer for from enemy aircraft. You did everything. You did everything of photography. You did the wireless. You did the artillery shoot all done by the pilot. The observer wasn't an observer. In effect, he was the aerial gunner.
So that in fact a very close relationship would of necessity build up between a pilot and his observer.
Absolutely, your observer was absolutely vital to your life. I mean, and if you had a good observer, um, he was your eye as far as enemy aircraft were concerned. And I was very lucky in the fact that as soon as I arrived, I was allotted, I think, what the most experienced observer, I think, in the whole squadron, who was practically ending his term of office as an observer and was going home to be trained as a pilot. So he took jolly good care that a young person like me wasn't going to land him into trouble. And he had wonderful eyesight. When we were flying, he could spot enemy aircraft in time, always knock me on the shoulder and say, "Now it's time you off."
What about the first occasion on which you were in any way harassed by enemy aircraft? What were you flying in, and could you describe the circumstances?
Well, soon after I arrived, in those days we had 18 machines in a squadron, and I think it was about a fortnight after I arrived. One day we lost 10 out of those 18 machines, just vanished. They never came back anyhow, did they? And it was after tea that day. Some of the machines had been taking photographs, mosaic photographs, and that evening, squadron commander sent for me and said, with none of these machines to come back, I want you to go and take a photograph of a certain area, straight away. And so, some couple of days, I took off with my very experienced observer. We went up 10,000 feet, and we crossed the line. We flew to do our photographs, or series of photographs. And when we were at 10,000 feet, being anti-aircraft being arched all the way, suddenly, about very close quarters, a German machine flew past us, about 10,000 feet, just one machine. And so I thought, well, thinking of all the other people who hadn't returned alive, I thought the question was the best part of that. So we didn't shoot at him, we didn't shoot at us. We passed each other quite friendly-like. In fact, we waved to each other. And I did my photographs, I came back, and all went well. That's the first time I'd seen an enemy machine in the air. It turned out to be quite friendly.
On the next occasion?
The next occasion, well, I again was doing photographs. And the photographs was a very dangerous thing because you had to fly at a constant height, usually 10,000 feet.
Who was taking the pictures? The observer?
No, I was, the pilot.
With the camera actually fixed
underneath the machine, you with your sight over the side. As I said before, the observer couldn't do a thing except look out
the watchdog.
Use your watchdog. On this occasion, I would lost so many machines. I was given a fighter escort of a whole squadron of I can't remember the type of machine. It was a backward stagger, DH, I can't remember what now, DH2, I think they were called. So I had a whole squadron, was about 12 machines escorting me by myself, just the one machine. And we were flying over this, doing our reconnaissance. And we were attacked by about a dozen Germans. But my escort stuck to me like gloves. I mean, they didn't lose me. They were around me the whole time. And at the minute the dogfight started, but I just carried on and didn't worry about it. I just flew on and did my photographs, came back, and the whole time I was really saved. My life was saved by my escort.
So it was active combat for you.
No, that was really about the only time I was ever rallied by enemy aircraft. Was after that. I always so normally we were only flying at about 5,000, you see? And if we were flying at 5,000, The enemy usually were about 15,000. You usually had time, if a Joe had good eyesight, as soon as you saw this, you were going to be attacked, you go down right low and get away. And so many of the times I got away just because I was a good sight.
But were you not involved in combat when you had a Bristol fighter?
No.
What words would you use to describe the scarred no man's land and frontline trenches of the Western Front as viewed from the air with regard to cover?
Well, we had a definite core area to look after. That core area was from the town of Ypres to the Belgian army. So we were the most left-hand corps of the whole British line. And looking down, as I did every day over this area, the whole area looked underwater. And we were just a sort of tracery of the rims of shell holes. The whole place otherwise was completely water. And there was no, in the villages, it just ceased to exist. I mean, the villages like Langemark and so on were just little red dust on the ground. And the big forest there was called Hoothouse Forest, were just a mangled, massive trees lying at all angles. But the ground, the look of the ground was water. The whole place appeared to be literally a swamp. And there were odd little duckboard tracks you could spot from the air in between the various shell holes. And those were the only means of getting about at all on duckboards.
Were you flying over the Ypres salient at any stage during the Third Battle of Ypres with its successive offensives on the 31st of July?
The whole time. I was in there.
Can you tell me about any of these particular occasions when you saw the attempts to advance through waterlogged ground and the nuclear resistance in these German pillboxes and things like that?
Well, we were there for the whole of the Passchendaele battle. I was there every day. And we did numerous contact patrols with the infantry when we were flying about 100 feet above them. And then they were literally fighting in water. They were, from shell hole to shell hole. And really, we would think from the air, in fact, an impossible condition. But the Germans on their side had concrete pillboxes. They were above ground. They had these concrete pillboxes. One of our tasks in the battle was to destroy these pillboxes. And we had very heavy artillery in those days. We had 15-inch railway mounting guns. We had 9.2 railway mounting guns. And one of our sort of more pleasant tasks was to knock out pillbox by pillbox, which we did with these enormous. We were the eyes of those guns.
And how did you do this?
Well, we did it by wireless. We were set up to register for, say, a 15-inch.
And you couldn't receive information, but you could.
No, you could send it. You see, but every pillbox was photographed before we took. The day before it was going to be destroyed, we went up and photographed it, and then we had a photograph in the machine with us of the target with circles going round the pillbox
to give a clock effect.
So the clock effect.
And
each circle had a number, or not a number, but a letter, A, B, C, D, and then I think the inner circle was Y, Z, I think, and then OK. And universe circle was about 25 yards from the target. And then when you were ready and you were looking at your target, you turned round. Well, first of all, because as you flew to the line, you picked up the battery and made contact with your wireless, and they put out a ground strip saying they were receiving you. Then you flew towards your ground strips.
Is this a shutter system? Or what is it on the ground?
No, the strips of cloth. Wire strips of cloth. were all sort of stiff stuff they put down.
What sort of signs?
Huh? Well, there's a code sign. I've gotten to the actual letters they used to put out, I mean, that they were ready and so on. And well, there was a definite code laid down that you understood.
Mm.
I mean, they would say, for instance, if there was any hitch in the operation or they weren't ready, they put out a special sign. But normally, once you established that they were ready and they were receiving our signals correctly, you flew towards the target at about 6,000 feet. And then you turned round and faced your battery. You set the signal on your wireless set far. You looked at the battery and you saw this terrific flash. And then you turned round and flew straight at the target. And you knew by telephoning to the battery beforehand the time of flight of the shell. So you knew more exactly when that shell was going to arrive. And then when the shell arrived, you looked at your photograph and you estimated which circle had been in, and you wireless back the correction. And we went on until the pillbox was destroyed.
When you say you wireless back the correction, do you mean that you recorded where it had fallen according to your clock, so that they could do the correction?
Yeah, do the correction. Yes, you wireless to say A10 or A4, X4. And so, I mean, you got them eventually onto the target.
Did you ever have the unnerving experience that some men did of being very near to these shells themselves?
Oh, you saw shells every day in the air passing, you know. Of course, with the storm, when you're flying, because when you're doing contact patrol, I mean, there are literally hundreds of shells passed through in the air, and the chances of being hit were very large. But when you were doing artillery observation, and usually for the bigger stuff, I mean, for 8-inch upwards, there was a big shell. I mean, it was a shell, say, 3-4 feet high. And their ceiling was usually 6, 7, 10,000 feet. And they try to come up through the air very, very slowly. They sort of trundle past you. And then go on its way. Because all went well, long as it didn't hit you.
As high as that?
Oh, yes.
These would be the big howitzers.
Big howitzers. No, I saw shells. I mean, I could almost always see the shell of the battery I was firing with.
And your contact work, which was different from this artillery observation, it's the exact function of this was to let headquarters know how far advanced parties of our men were and whether there were German reinforcements coming up to block off any sort of move.
That's right. But the trouble was is that
this could be done by wireless, by one-way wireless.
No, it was done by marking a map.
Why wasn't it done?
Putting in the map, because the planning headquarters didn't have wireless.
Yes.
You had these blank maps of a large scale, and you put position. You do position of the forward troops of ours, and the forward troops you could locate of German. You put it in a message bag which had coloured streamers. We then flew over the Talon headquarters at very low height, about 50 feet, and dropped the message on them.
Now, the degree of cooperation between Army and our FC and RAF increased, obviously, through experience, and it reached its height of effectiveness in 1918 with the German breakthrough and in helping with the balancing of the German attack. And then, of course, the holding of the Germans and the pushing of them back. What do you remember of those days of gloom and despondency initially, and then the sense of victory?
Well, we were, at Pro in Belgium, and the German offensive, or the main offensive, of course, started on the Somme area.
It's important.
Yeah, but suddenly it switched to Belgium. I mean, it switched to
Yes.
IO there.
Yes.
And we were on aerodrome, and we German advance. We heard the fire. It wasn't so far away. We could hear the terrific bombardment going on. And that day, the squadron commander said every machine had to go at once, first light in the morning, to attack the German advancing to the Portuguese army over there. I never flown there in my life before. See, that I by then had become a flight commander, and I had a flight of 6 machines.
Bristol fighters.
No, we still had RE8 then. We didn't have Bristol fighters till after that. So we took off from the aerodrome, 6 machines, and we all had, I think, 25-pound bombs. We had, I think, probably I remember 10 of them. 10 25-pound bombs. And my aerial gunner behind me had twin Lewis guns by then, and already many drums of ammunition. I had a Vickers gun in the front of the machine. And it was a terrible day. The ceiling was only about 200 feet, pouring with rain. We had to fly to a place we'd never seen before, and we took off with, say, 6 machines. We flew over, I can't remember all the names of the places, but we came on. I remember flying over an aerodrome, which was, I think, somewhere. I can't remember the name of the place. But anyhow, this aerodrome, we flew over it about 200 feet, and there in the middle of the aerodrome was about 15 Sopwith camels, all piled in a heap, all on fire. And I thought it was a bit odd. And we flew over the aerodrome, and then we went straight along a very straight road, and I suddenly realized that all the people below me were German. So we flew along this road, you see, 6 of us, 6 machines, and we dropped our bombs all along the road on these columns of Germans. And my observer had a wonderful time shooting over the side of the machine with his twin Lewis guns. But unfortunately, they retaliated, and we were shot from those machine guns on the ground, fired at us. And suddenly, my observer hit me on the back and said he'd been hit, and that his machine, his Lewis gun had been smashed, and he was a casualty. Yeah. And so I basically climbed into the rainy clouds above me. It was only about 200 feet, and cut into the cloud, because in those days you had no, once you got into a cloud, you were lost. I mean, you had no idea, our compass didn't work effectively. You had no ceiling to guide you. And so every time I came out of the cloud, I was shut out. We went on, I guess, for some time. Then my observer suddenly decided he wasn't wounded after all. What had happened was his seat had been hit by bullets, and the jar on his behind, he'd probably been shot to the behind, you see. But well, he hadn't been hit at all. But his guns had been smashed, so he couldn't do anything more about that. Anyhow, so eventually I thought, well, the only thing to do was to get through the clouds. And so eventually I got right through the clouds. It was a lovely sunny day right above the cloud. And then my compass began to work. So I was able to fly. I thought, well, I'd fly west as far as I could and come through the cloud again, and hope I was the right side of the line. And so I eventually came through the clouds with some difficulty, because every time you were in a cloud, you didn't know whether you were standing up, your machine was upside down or right way up. Eventually I came through the cloud, and I was shot at again, because I hadn't gone far enough west. I went up again, and eventually I came through the cloud, and I wasn't shot at. And eventually I saw an aerodrome below me, and I landed. Luckily, I was about 100 miles where I started, but I was the right side of the line. And then I managed to get the squadron to ring up my squadron so that we were still intact. And then in the afternoon, I went back to my squadron. By which time, the aerodrome had come under severe 9.2 fire from German guns. And the aerodrome was in a very sticky position when I got back. So the whole squadron of survivors had to evacuate the aerodrome that day, and we flew to Calais and landed at Calais and fought the war from Calais from that onwards.
It would be too much to hope that you'd had a chance to fly over the Zeebrugge, after the Zeebrugge raid.
I flew over that area. I see, practically every day. You see,
Did you fly there up to St George's Day with Keyes's raid?
what date? Are you talking the date?
April the 21st, I think. St George's Day.
Yeah, April 21st,
When
19.
they blocked the
I was there. Yes, we did.
23rd, I'm told.
We flew. My front extended right up to Gand, which
You
is
remember the famous Zeebrugge raid?
yes, I do remember the raid, but it wasn't. Between us and the Zeebrugge raid was the Belgian army. We didn't really operate on that particular zone, but we had the task of keeping our eyes on Belgium as a whole. And that's when I saw from Gand, the Germans used to send out railway mounting guns, which we dealt with one day.
Were you ever in a machine that enabled you to fire yourself?
What we used to do is we used to do what you call offensive patrols. And the offensive patrol was always done just at dusk. And we used to go over at about 100 feet, just as it's getting dark. And we'd go, within those days, you'd think 100 miles an hour was quite fast. We used to go about 100 miles an hour up the roads approaching the front from the German side. And then we hoped to catch the German transport coming up the line at dusk. The transport used to stop, so in daylight, to get to the front just as it got dark.
What sort of transport do you mean?
Horse, and also some lorries. And then we'd go whooshing along the road.
Sort of convoy?
The convoy, yeah. I would fire my Vickers gun all along the road, and my observer would then, have you swept over the German convoy, my observer would fire his twin guns from behind. But the trouble was, you see, every German road every road looked much like any other road. At 100 feet, the danger was you soon got lost. Which I did one occasion. I got completely lost, and I had no idea. It got dark, and I had no idea where I was at all. And I was so low down. Again, I had no idea where I was at all, and I flew. And I thought, well, I mean, there was no good going on in the dark. I'd have to land. And I landed. First thing that happened, I went under some telegraph poles without hitting them, luckily. And then I missed the hop field with the hop poles sitting on the ground. I eventually finished up in the plowed field. And I knew I was going to land, but my aerial gunner didn't realize I was going to do it. And because he wasn't strapped in, and he got two black eyes.
Would you confess to a degree of enjoyment that harassing or strafing German troops, sort of hunting instinct?
Oh yes, it was exciting, a very exciting adventure, really.
And not too dangerous.
Very dangerous for us. I mean, it was very dangerous for us, but equally dangerous for them. But I mean, for us, it was an extremely dangerous mission.
Even after August, as they began to, their morale began to go.
No, the danger to your own self was the fact of getting lost.
Yes.
It was so easy. I mean, you
not having sufficient fuel or being into the fuel tank and losing fuel.
No, but you see, it's so difficult when you're flying even 100 miles an hour at 100 feet. I mean, there's nowhere you are. I mean, every French straight road looked very much like any other straight road. Every canal looked much like any other canal. And you soon got completely sort of, mystified from the way you were. You hoped to see that you would come back along the same road, but you very easily didn't.
Now, in both the First and the Second World War, there developed what might be called a mystique of RFC, RAF service life. I've seen the photograph of the big black dog and the motorbike and sometimes even a sporting car, which would whisk the pilot off far enough behind the lines for enjoyable entertainment, then perhaps an area during the record player and the parties and the songs. Perhaps a different, in fact, indeed, a different way of life from that of the trenches. What do you recall of this?
Well, your aerodrome was about 10, 15 miles behind the front, and you live really, considering, in comparing it with trench life,